My name is Carrie A. Landon, and I am 28 years old. Sup, Reddit. Strap in, because this one is real messed up, and I'm still trying to understand how I survived it. Growing up, my older sister Mallory was the golden child, and I was whatever orbited around her, trying not to get burned. Firstborn. Daddy's little princess, at least according to our mother, Judith. She treated Mallory like royalty and treated me like a participation trophy she forgot to put on the shelf. Every family story somehow circled back to Mallory. Every holiday card put her front and center. Even when I graduated valedictorian, Judith managed to pivot dinner conversation into a discussion about Mallory's engagement photos. The woman could change subjects faster than a politician dodging questions. My father, Gene, tried to balance things out. He's the kind of man who shows love through actions, not speeches. He came to every one of my games. He taught me how to fish, how to change a tire, how to read financial statements. He was present in the ways that mattered, even when Judith made it difficult. But Gene wasn't built for confrontation. He'd been raised to keep the peace, avoid conflict, let sleeping dogs lie. So when Judith steamrolled my achievements, he'd shoot me apologetic looks, but rarely intervene. It wasn't malicious. He just didn't know how to fight for me without blowing up his marriage. That changed after the basement, but I'm not there yet. Mallory got married at 22 to a guy named Boyd who sold insurance and had the personality of a wet napkin. She had 3 kids in 4 years, moved into a house she couldn't afford in a neighborhood she wanted people to think she belonged in, and slowly started drowning in a life that looked great on Instagram and miserable everywhere else. Meanwhile, I did the opposite of peak early. I got my act together in college. I studied accounting because I like things that add up and make sense, unlike my family. I met my boyfriend Ethan at a coffee shop when he told me my laptop screensaver was aggressively boring. Ethan is the kind of man who doesn't tolerate nonsense from anyone, especially not from people who hide cruelty behind family. When I first explained the money situation with Mallory to him, he stared at me like I'd grown a second head. The loans started small. 200 here, 300 there. Boyd's commission was delayed. The kids needed something. Car trouble. I covered it because that's what sisters do, or that's what I told myself. Over 4 years, it added up to $12,000, not a single penny repaid. And the one time I asked about getting some of it back, Mallory acted like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. How could I be so selfish? Didn't I know how hard her life was? When I finally cut her off, she stopped speaking to me for 2 months. Then she started again, but only when she needed something or wanted to make a passive-aggressive comment at family gatherings. That's the part people don't get. With someone like Mallory, silence isn't peace. Silence is punishment. It's a reminder that love in our family is conditional. The basement happened on Thanksgiving weekend. Ethan and I drove 5 hours from Columbus back to my hometown in Ohio because my father had organized the whole gathering. He wanted to celebrate something that actually belonged to me. I'd just made junior partner at my firm, youngest partner in the Columbus office's history. Not some headline achievement, but for me, it meant something. It meant I'd built a life with my own hands, in spite of the way I was raised. Here's the thing I didn't realize at the time. Making junior partner meant more access, more oversight, more visibility into numbers that other people preferred to keep messy. And 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, on a phone call that felt harmless, I mentioned to Mallory that I was helping Dad organize his estate documents. Just family stuff, consolidating accounts, reviewing statements, making sure nothing weird was going on. She asked if I'd be pulling credit reports. I said probably, just to be safe. Her voice went tight for half a second. Then she laughed and changed the subject. I should have paid attention, because that was the moment she stopped seeing me as her younger sister and started seeing me as a threat. My friend Camille came with us that holiday, and if that sounds random, it's because it was. Camille had been staying with Ethan and me after her divorce, the kind that detonates your life in slow motion and then leaves you standing in the smoke holding a coffee you never got to finish. Her husband had found himself, which apparently required finding himself in their neighbor's bedroom. Camille handled it the way a lot of people handle shock. She ate cereal for dinner and watched conspiracy documentaries until Ethan finally gave her our spare room and told her she was allowed to be a human being again. She was supposed to be temporary. Then Thanksgiving showed up, and Camille had nowhere to go, so she came with us. She's 6'1", wears basketball shorts in weather that has no business allowing bare knees, and has the social awareness of a golden retriever. She also has instincts I should have listened to. When we arrived Wednesday evening, Mallory was already there. She met me at the door with a hug that lasted 2 seconds too long. That clingy squeeze people do when they're trying to make sure you feel close enough to stop questioning them. She asked about the drive, asked about work, asked about my big promotion with a brightness that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan's hand brushed mine, a silent check-in, and Camille hovered behind us, watching like she was trying to count exits. That night, Mallory found me alone in the kitchen, getting water, and said something that didn't fit the moment. She told me I should leave my phone charging during family time, that it was rude to be checking work emails constantly. Then she added, like it was a helpful tip, that the basement had terrible signal anyway, so if I needed to go down there for any reason, I might as well keep my phone on the counter. It was such a weird thing to mention that my brain didn't know what to do with it. I filed it away and forgot about it, which is what you do when you've been trained your whole life to ignore the feeling that something is off. Camille didn't ignore it. Later that night, she pulled me aside while Ethan was helping my dad carry something from the garage. "Dude," she said, lowering her voice, "your sister is being weird." She nodded toward the living room, where Mallory was laughing too loudly at something my mom said, the laugh landing a half beat too late like she'd been practicing it. "She asked me like 3 questions about you and 0 questions about literally anything else. That's not normal." I told her she was paranoid, told myself the same thing. Thanksgiving dinner the next day was a masterclass in family dysfunction. Every time someone mentioned my promotion, Mallory changed the subject. When my dad stood up to make a toast, she suddenly remembered her youngest needed something in the other room. My mom kept shooting her sympathetic looks like Mallory was the one suffering through the evening, like we were forcing her to witness my success. There was one moment that stuck with me later. Mallory mentioned, casually, that she'd heard identity theft was really common these days. Didn't Dad worry about that? My dad shrugged and said he wasn't worried because he had me looking at things now. He even said having an accountant in the family was better than any fraud protection service. I watched Mallory's face when he said that. Something shifted. A flicker of panic, quickly masked by a smile. At the time, I couldn't name it. Later, it felt like a flare in the dark. Her kids weren't helping matters. They were 8, 6, and 4, and they had the energy of caffeinated squirrels. Every time the conversation turned toward me, one of them needed something, knocked something over, started crying, spilled a drink. After the third interruption, I started wondering if she'd trained them to cause distractions on command. Ethan's hand found mine under the table and squeezed once, our signal for "I see it too." My father finally got his toast in during dessert. He stood up, cleared his throat, and said he was proud of me. He said watching me build a career through hard work was one of the great joys of his life. He said I'd become the kind of woman he'd hoped I'd become. My mom stared at her plate. Mallory excused herself to the bathroom. The moment was bruised, but my dad finished anyway. I remember his voice wobbling slightly, like he knew he was speaking into a room that didn't want to hear it. After dessert, Mallory cornered me in the kitchen while I was getting coffee. She asked about the estate review I'd mentioned. How far along was I? Had I pulled credit reports yet? Had I looked at Dad's accounts? The questions came too fast, too specific, and when I asked her why she cared, she laughed way too hard and said she was just joking. Then she asked if I could look at her mortgage documents sometime. She said she'd been thinking about refinancing. She said I'd probably understand the numbers better than she could. I told her maybe after the holidays. She nodded, but her eyes didn't match the smile. Friday morning, she found me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. She had that smile she used to wear right before she got me in trouble when we were kids. My dad wandered in and mentioned a bank letter he didn't recognize, something about a credit inquiry. He asked if I could pull his credit report after breakfast and see what was going on. I said yes. I didn't notice Mallory's hand tighten on the refrigerator door handle. I didn't notice the way her shoulders lifted like she'd just made a decision. 20 minutes later, she said the sump pump was making a weird noise. "Can you go check it out?" she asked, voice too sweet. Boyd threw out his back, and Dad shouldn't be going down those stairs. It sounded reasonable. It was the kind of request families make all the time. My parents' basement was old and unfinished. Stone walls, exposed pipes, that musty Ohio smell that never leaves no matter how many dehumidifiers you buy. I grabbed a flashlight and headed for the basement door. I left my inhaler on the counter. I left my phone there too. Mallory had suggested keeping it charging, and I was only going down for a minute. What could go wrong? The stairs creaked under my weight. The basement air hit me like a slap, freezing and damp. The little temperature gauge near the furnace read 37 degrees. I walked to the sump pump, listened, checked it, and it sounded fine. No weird noise. Nothing wrong. I turned to call up to Mallory and ask what exactly she'd heard. The door slammed. The lock clicked. I took the stairs 2 at a time and threw my shoulder against the wood. It didn't budge. Someone had installed a deadbolt on the outside. Heavy-duty brass hardware that absolutely had not been there the last time I visited. I could feel it in the way the door didn't even shutter. "Mallory!" I yelled, pounding hard enough to sting. "What is this?" No answer. Then music started upstairs, loud, the kind of volume that drowns out inconvenient sounds. That's when my chest tightened. Cold air plus panic is asthma's favorite combination. I tried to slow my breathing, but every inhale felt sharper, narrower, like my lungs were turning on me. I pounded until my fists were raw. Tried the basement windows, but they were the old fixed kind that don't open. I looked for another exit and found nothing but stone and cold and that one door with its brand new lock. And somewhere above me, my sister was making sure no one could hear me. By hour 2, the cold had already soaked through my jeans and flannel like I'd jumped into a lake. Concrete doesn't just steal heat, it hoards it, and the longer you stay still, the more it takes. I tried pacing the basement, counting my steps, forcing movement to keep my blood going. I yelled until my throat burned, then switched to banging on the pipes with a piece of scrap metal I found behind an old toolbox, hoping the vibration would travel up through the walls. Nothing. Every time I stopped moving, the shaking got worse. I could hear my own breathing, the wheeze creeping in, each breath a little tighter than the last. I sat down on the stairs and tried to use the breathing techniques my pulmonologist drilled into me years ago. Slow inhale through the nose, longer exhale through the mouth. It's hard to do that when your brain is screaming that you're trapped. By hour 3, I started thinking in fragments. Why would she do this? This isn't funny. This isn't a prank. The thought that kept circling was timing. She didn't do this randomly. She waited until after Dad mentioned the credit report, until after I said I'd pull it. That's when fear slid in, cold and heavy, right alongside the hypothermia. I dragged a moth-eaten blanket off a shelf and wrapped it around myself, found flattened cardboard boxes and stacked them to keep my body off the floor. Stuffed old newspapers inside my shirt like some kind of desperate insulation. The paper crinkled every time I moved, a sound that felt absurdly loud in the quiet. By hour 4, my shivering turned violent, teeth chattering so hard my jaw ached. I did jumping jacks until my chest protested, then paced again until my legs burned. Every time I felt sleepy, I forced myself to stand up because I knew that drowsiness meant my body was giving up. I recited state capitals out loud, counted backwards from 1,000 by sevens, did multiplication problems in my head that should have been easy but felt impossible. Around hour 6, the coughing started. Deep, ripping coughs that felt like my lungs were trying to escape through my throat. The air was slicing me open from the inside. I reached for my inhaler out of instinct, then remembered it was upstairs on the counter, exactly where my sister had suggested I leave it. That's when the anger finally broke through the panic. She knew. She'd known about my asthma since I was 12. She used to hide my inhaler when we were kids and call it a joke. I remembered sitting on my bed gasping while she laughed from the hallway, Judith telling me to stop being dramatic. By hour 8, the shaking slowed, which was worse. Hypothermia has this cruel trick where it convinces you you're warming up right before things go bad. My fingers were numb. My toes felt like they weren't attached to me anymore. The temperature gauge dipped lower as night settled in. The hallucinations started around hour 9. I thought I heard my grandmother's voice telling me to sit down, to rest. I thought I heard Ethan calling my name from somewhere behind the wall. Shadows moved in ways shadows don't move. I knew what was happening. At least part of me did. Hypothermia messes with your brain, makes you confused, makes you want to lie down and sleep. Sleep meant death. By hour 10, I made peace with the idea that I might not make it out. Not in some dramatic movie-style way. Just this quiet acceptance that nobody was coming. That whatever she was hiding mattered more to her than my life. The thought that wouldn't let go was money. Why now? Why this moment? I'd been helping my family for years. Covering bills, fixing problems, letting things slide. The only difference was that now I had access. I was about to look at numbers she didn't want me to see. By hour 12, I was talking to myself constantly just to stay awake. I named every baseball team I could think of, repeated my address, repeated my name, repeated Ethan's name like a lifeline. My math skills, the thing I built my entire career on, deserted me. Simple equations felt like advanced physics. I curled into a ball, tucked my hands into my armpits, pressed my knees to my chest. The shaking was gone now. My body felt heavy, like it was sinking into the concrete. And then suddenly noise. Not imagined noise, real noise. A crash above me, a shout. Another crash, louder this time. The door splintered inward on the fourth kick. I barely registered it at first. I just knew light flooded the stairwell and someone was yelling my name. My dad. He was screaming, his voice cracking, his face wild with panic. He didn't hesitate. He didn't wait for help. He hauled me up the stairs with a strength I didn't know he still had, bad knee and all. I remember cold air rushing past me, then warmth, then voices stacking on top of each other. I saw Mallory in this kitchen, her face draining of color. She started talking immediately, words tumbling out, saying she thought I'd left, that she had no idea I was down there. Camille stepped between her and my dad without saying a word, her body a wall. Ethan was on the phone with 911, his voice steady but tight, telling them I wasn't breathing right. The ambulance arrived fast. Oxygen mask, sirens, hands lifting me, someone saying my core temperature was dangerously low. I drifted in and out, catching pieces. Ethan's face above me, my dad apologizing over and over, my mom standing off to the side, silent. I woke up in the hospital under heat lamps, wires everywhere, my chest aching like I'd been punched from the inside. Dr. Vivian Reeves stood at the foot of my bed reading my chart. Her expression wasn't gentle. She asked me what happened. I told her everything. And when I finished, she didn't hesitate. She said she was calling the police. Detective Garza showed up an hour later, and the moment she walked into my room, I knew she wasn't buying any version of this that ended with prank. She was mid-40s, sharp-eyed, hair pulled back tight, the kind of woman who'd heard every excuse people thought was clever. Her partner, a younger officer named Wheeler, stayed quiet, taking notes, eyes moving constantly. Garza asked me to walk through everything again, slower this time. When did the questions about finances start? How often had my sister asked about audits, credit reports, account access? Did she know about my asthma? I told her yes, she'd known since I was a kid. I told her about the inhaler, about how Mallory used to hide it when we were teenagers and laugh while I panicked. Garza's jaw tightened just slightly at that. Then she asked about cameras. My dad had installed a security system 2 years earlier after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but enough to cover the first floor, the kitchen, the hallway near the basement door. He handed over the footage without hesitation. He came back to my room afterward looking like someone had ripped the ground out from under him. She checked the lock, he said, voice shaking. 6 times. 6 times in 14 hours. The footage showed it all. Mallory walking past the basement door, stopping, touching the handle, pressing her ear to it, walking away, coming back, over and over. Every time the house got quiet, she found a reason to turn the volume back up. Music, movies, the kids. She positioned herself like a conductor, keeping everything loud enough to drown out anything she didn't want heard. It also showed her grabbing my phone from the counter, typing, deleting, putting it back exactly where it had been. Later, Detective Garza explained that she'd sent a text to Ethan from my phone saying I'd gotten a work emergency and had to leave early. She'd even messaged my work partner with a vague excuse. She didn't just lock me in the basement, she erased me. Garza watched the footage twice, then looked at me and asked a question that made my stomach drop. When was the first time she asked about pulling credit reports? 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Garza nodded like a puzzle piece had clicked into place. They arrested Mallory that night. She cried, said it was a misunderstanding, a prank that went too far, said she'd meant to let me out after an hour but got distracted. The footage destroyed that story. You don't forget something you check 6 times. 2 days later, Garza called me again. Her tone was different. We found some things at your sister's house during the search, she said. I need to ask you about your father's finances. They'd found a credit application for a business loan in my dad's name, $42,000. Forged signature. The business didn't exist. The loan had been approved 8 months earlier. They'd found donation logs from the church fundraiser Mallory had helped organize, records that didn't match what the church had deposited. Small skims over time that added up to $18,000. They'd found credit cards in her husband Boyd's name that he didn't know existed, hidden statements showing cash advances and purchases totaling more than $60,000. Then there were the searches on her phone. Basement temperature overnight November. How long until hypothermia dangerous? Asthma attack cold air how long? Dated across a 2-week span ending 3 days before Thanksgiving. The hardware store footage sealed it. Mallory buying a heavy-duty deadbolt and a kitchen timer on the same receipt, paid in cash. The timer was never found. Garza believed she'd used it to track how long I'd been down there. When Garza laid it all out, the motive finally made sense. This wasn't jealousy. This was desperation. I'd become junior partner. I had access. I was about to review accounts, pull credit reports, ask questions she couldn't answer. If I found that loan, those skims, those hidden cards, everything she'd built her life on would collapse. The basement wasn't about humiliation or sibling rivalry. It was about stopping me. If I'd died, it would have been a tragic accident. If I'd been incapacitated for weeks, she'd have time to clean up the mess, destroy documents, close accounts, fix records, make the problem go away. The charges were upgraded that afternoon. Attempted murder, kidnapping, identity theft. Judith came to the hospital the next day, not to check on me, but to demand I drop everything. She stood at the foot of my bed and said, "Think about what you're doing to this family. Your sister has children, a reputation. You're going to destroy all of that over a misunderstanding." I stared at her, bandages on my fingers and toes, a machine helping me breathe. She looked up hypothermia timelines for weeks, I said. She stole $42,000 in Dad's name. This isn't a misunderstanding. Judith scoffed. You're exaggerating. You always exaggerate. Ethan stood up then, slow and deliberate. Get out, he said. Judith sputtered, said she had every right to visit her own daughter. Ethan didn't raise his voice. Your daughter tried to kill my girlfriend to cover up fraud. Leave now, or I call security. She left, calling me ungrateful on her way out. My dad filed for divorce 3 days later. He told me watching the footage had broken something in him. Seeing Mallory check that lock. Seeing Judith immediately defend her. He said he realized he'd been keeping the peace at the cost of the truth. The months that followed were brutal. 3 surgeries. Frostbite took the tips of 2 toes and half a finger. My lung function dropped permanently. Physical therapy, breathing treatments, learning how to walk properly again. The investigation kept expanding. Total fraud damage topped $125,000. Boyd filed for divorce. He came to the hospital once, sat beside my bed, and said, I think she hated you because you could see through her. Everyone else bought it. You didn't. He got full custody of the kids and moved away. The trial took 8 months. The prosecution had everything. Footage, searches, receipts, expert testimony. My doctor explained how close I'd come to dying. Financial analysts laid out the fraud. Boyd testified about the hidden cards and forged signatures. My dad testified about the loan he never applied for. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, kidnapping, identity theft. 10 to 15 years. Judith screamed in this courtroom, called me a monster, said I'd destroyed the family. Security escorted her out. I sat there numb, Ethan's hand in mine, realizing that the sister I grew up with was gone. Or maybe she'd never been who I thought she was. The verdict didn't end the fallout. It detonated it. Judith unraveled first. Without Mallory to orbit, and without my father to quietly absorb the damage, she didn't know who she was. The divorce moved fast and ugly. My dad took what he needed and left the rest, including the house Judith insisted on keeping, even though she couldn't afford it. She burned through retirement accounts, paying lawyers to chase appeals that went nowhere. Every motion was denied. Every argument dismissed. The footage was too clear. The searches too specific. The intent too obvious. During my recovery, Ethan became my anchor. He drove me to physical therapy. Sat through appointments where doctors explained what permanent lung damage meant in calm, clinical tones that made me want to scream. He helped me learn how to walk again without favoring the foot missing pieces of itself. He learned my new inhaler schedule better than I did. When I woke up shaking from nightmares where the door never opened, he was there, reminding me I was safe. Camille appointed herself my unofficial bodyguard. She screened calls, physically blocked Judith once when she tried to push past her into our apartment, shouting about maternal rights and betrayal. Camille didn't raise her voice. She just stood there, all 6'1" of her, and said, "You're not welcome," until Judith backed down. The trial records cracked open other doors. Once the major charges were public, people started looking closer at the smaller things. The church launched an internal audit. The insurance company opened a fraud investigation. The bank flagged additional credit inquiries made in my father's name. None of those were dramatic on their own, but together they built a paper trail Mallory could never outrun. Judith kept calling me despite the restraining order, cycling through numbers, leaving voicemails about how alone she was, how no one understood what she was going through, how I'd ruined everything she'd built. I blocked every number, changed my phone. Eventually, she ran out of ways to reach me or ran out of energy trying. Life didn't snap back into place. It crept. I measured progress in inches, standing longer without pain, breathing without wheezing, sleeping through the night without waking in a cold sweat. The therapist said trauma rewires your sense of safety, that it takes time to teach your body the danger is over. Some days I believed her. Some days I didn't. When the sentence was finalized, I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just a quiet acceptance that this chapter was sealed. Mallory was gone, but the damage didn't disappear with her. That's when Ethan did something I didn't expect. He didn't push me to forgive. He didn't push me to confront. He didn't push me to move on. He asked me what I wanted my life to look like without my family defining the edges of it. He asked where I wanted to live, what kind of work felt meaningful now, what kind of quiet I needed. We moved, not as an escape, but as a reset. New city, new routines. I took a position at a smaller firm. Less money, less prestige, more sanity. We bought a house with sunlight and a yard and neighbors who didn't know my story. We adopted a golden retriever who barked at his own reflection and acted brave around squirrels. We named him Walter, which made Ethan laugh every time he called him in. 2 years after the trial, we had our son. Holding him for the first time rewired something else in me. Not fear this time, resolve. I understood, in a visceral way, what my father had failed to do when it mattered most. Love isn't silence. Love is protection. Love is choosing the hard truth over the comfortable lie. My dad visits now, twice a year. He's softer, more present. He doesn't pretend the past didn't happen. We don't talk about Judith or Mallory unless I bring it up. When he leaves, he hugs me longer than he used to. It's awkward. It's real. Mallory served 8 years. She got out early on paper, completed programs, model behavior. I prepared for it, renewed the restraining order, updated security, made sure every place in my life knew her face and her name. For the first year, nothing happened. I heard she'd moved to Arizona, got a call center job, kept her head down. Then Judith died. Congestive heart failure. Years of stress and denial catching up. She died alone in the house she'd insisted on keeping, surrounded by photos of a family that no longer existed. Mallory reached out after the funeral. 3 pages, handwritten, talk of faith, change, understanding. Requests for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to explain. I read it twice, then I burned it. At the service, we stayed on opposite sides of the room. Boyd brought the kids, teenagers now, unsure how to feel about a grandmother they barely remembered. My father didn't come. He said his goodbyes years earlier. Afterward, Mallory tried to approach me, said she just wanted to apologize properly. I turned and walked away. Ethan was waiting in the car with our son. He squeezed my hand when I got in. We drove home without talking. Some things don't need words. I thought that would be the end of it. That was my mistake. 6 months after Judith's funeral, Mallory made one last catastrophic error. She'd been telling her version of the story to anyone who would listen, that I'd set her up, that the evidence was fabricated, that she'd been railroaded by a jealous younger sister who couldn't stand seeing her happy. She told this story so many times it became muscle memory, a script she could perform without blinking. She told it to Boyd's new wife. Her name was Mariana, and unlike most people Mallory encountered, Mariana asked questions. Calm ones. Specific ones. She asked Boyd if any of it was true. Boyd didn't argue. He didn't editorialize. He pulled out a folder and showed her everything. The footage, the phone records, the loan documents, the financial trail, the medical reports. He showed her what almost killed me. Mariana didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't confront Mallory. She posted. Not a rant, not a meltdown. A carefully worded account of what actually happened, backed by public court records. Dates, case numbers, sentencing documents. No opinions, just facts. It made its way through local groups first, then broader forums, then survivor networks, people who knew how to recognize patterns. It didn't go viral in the celebrity sense. It went viral in the way that matters. Employers saw it, churches saw it, landlords saw it. Once HR saw attempted murder and restitution orders on a background check, the call center job disappeared. The apartment complex followed. The church she'd joined quietly parted ways. She moved, then moved again, each place smaller, further from anything resembling a fresh start. Her kids blocked her number one by one. She called me screaming that I'd ruined her life, that I wouldn't let her move on, that I was obsessed with destroying her. I listened, calm in a way that would have terrified my younger self. You spent weeks planning how to kill me so I wouldn't find out you stole over $100,000, I said. You don't get to move on. I hung up and blocked her number. That was 2 years ago. People think closure is loud. It isn't. Closure is waking up and realizing you didn't think about them at all yesterday. Life settled into something ordinary and good. Ethan and I built routines that weren't centered on survival. Mornings with our son, messy breakfasts, workdays that ended without dread. My breathing never fully recovered, but it stabilized. I learned my limits and respected them. I stopped apologizing for needing help. My father came to visit, sat on the porch with me while our son toddled around the yard, and said something he'd never said when I was a kid. I should have protected you better. It didn't fix the past, but it mattered. Camille found her footing, too. She moved out, started dating again, built a life that didn't revolve around disaster. She still checks in on me like a sentry, though. Some instincts don't fade. Every once in a while, I'd hear a rumor about Mallory. Another move. Another job that didn't last. Another attempt to explain away her past. Each one smaller than the last. She'd burned every bridge that could carry her weight. I didn't follow. I didn't ask. She wasn't my responsibility anymore. The last time I heard her voice was on a voicemail from an unrecognized number. She sounded tired. Not angry. Not manipulative. Just worn down. She said prison had changed her. That she understood now. That she wanted to explain why she did what she did. I deleted it without listening to the end. Some explanations come too late to matter. Stop! Part 8. Here's the thing people don't like to hear. Justice doesn't restore what you lose. It just stops the bleeding. I'll never get back the pieces of my body that froze on that concrete floor. I'll never erase the nights I wake up remembering the sound of that lock clicking. I'll never fully forget the look on my sister's face when she realized she'd been caught. But I got something else. I got a life that isn't built around appeasing someone else's damage. I got a partner who protects instead of excuses. I got a son who will never be taught that love means silence. I got boundaries that don't wobble under pressure. Mallory is a cautionary tale now. A footnote. A name attached to a court record and a warning label. I don't hate her. I don't pity her. I don't think about her at all unless someone else brings her up. That's the real ending. Not revenge. Not forgiveness. Irrelevance.